Hello y'all and welcome back. In this module we're going to be discussing the question of free will versus determinism. But before we do that, I'm going to need to take a step back and do what I didn't, due to time constraints, have an opportunity to do in the previous module, which is just define the terms metaphysics and epistemology. We're getting into these subfields of philosophy. What are they? We'll start with metaphysics. Metaphysics is, along with epistemology, ethics, and logic, one of the four primary subfields of philosophy, and it's best understood by breaking it down into its constituent parts. The English word metaphysics comes from the Greek word metaphysika, which is itself a compound of meta, a Greek preposition which has a number of meanings. We know this because the big corporation meta sort of means like above or beyond, right? But in this context, that preposition means after. And physika, which means physics, and it is, of course, where we get our English word physics. So this metaphysics is the name of one of Aristotle's works. And Aristotle's works the work called the Metaphysics gets its name for this reason. Aristotle's extant works are organized in a particular order, just like the books of the Bible are organized in a particular order. Aristotle's works are organized by different scribes, most prominently Andronicus of Rhodes. And he has a work called the Physics. And in this work, Ta Physica, the Physics, he just discusses the physical world, different aspects and features of the physical world and its structure. Canonically, when you turn the page, after you're done with the Physics, you come to a work which is just after the Physics, in which Aristotle addresses a number of different kind of related topics, a sort of hodgepodge of topics. And because it comes after the Physics, it's just called the things after the Physics, ta meta, ta physica, or the metaphysics. Aristotle doesn't give it this name. I personally don't think he even sits down to write a single work called the Metaphysics. I think he just sort of puts together some different essays that he has, but that's where we get the name. And metaphysics very generally addresses the question of what is there, what exists, what is real. So for instance, some people will say, well, physical stuff is all that's real. And so if you can't see, smell, taste, hear, or touch it, you shouldn't believe in it, right? And they are primarily going to be guided by scientific considerations in determining what to believe in. So that's a metaphysical position that we'll look at a little bit down the road. Others will say, no, I think that God exists also. And you don't grasp God with your five senses, at least not primarily. You grasp him with your mind or maybe some other faculty. That's also a metaphysical position. Others will say, no, I think God exists, but also souls. Human beings have or are souls, non-physical things. And when you die, your soul is going to go to heaven or hell. So heaven, hell, souls, God, all of these are metaphysical posits, things that you may or may not believe in. In addition to that question, the questions of God, souls, metaphysics also addresses the question of free will. Do we have free will, or is everything determined? Perhaps both those things are true. That and many other topics are in the subfield of metaphysics. Epistemology, for its part, comes from the Greek word episteme, meaning knowledge, and it's the study of knowledge and belief in all its forms. So a classic epistemological question is, can you know anything for sure? You'll hear people say, and this is not just in philosophical context, people will often say to me as we sort of talk, well, you can't know anything for sure. Nothing is certain. Nothing is fixed, right? It's all just up in the air. Well, that's an epistemological question. Can you know some things for sure, or is everything just conjecture, belief, and opinion? Another epistemological question is, what is the nature of good explanation? So I alluded a second ago to this idea that some people have, that you can explain everything, at least in principle, using just the physical sciences, that you don't need God to explain something like the existence of the world or human moral feeling or something like that. Well, that's an epistemological claim because it's a claim about the nature of knowledge or explanation, saying you can know something fully and clearly without bringing in this other metaphysical apparatus. So these questions are going to be some primary epistemological questions. And it's worth noting that you see right away here that these are very closely related subfields, because if I claim, for instance, that you don't need God to explain the physical world, I'm making a metaphysical claim, but that claim about explanation is an epistemological claim. And if you make a metaphysical claim, you say, well, God exists, you are, of course, claiming in some sense to know that. And somebody could not unreasonably say, well, how do you know that? How do you know God exists? And whatever answer that you give to that question, that's going to be an epistemological answer. So these are very closely related fields. When you make a metaphysical claim, you make an epistemological claim, and vice versa. So they go hand in hand. Now, as we discuss free will versus determinism, we have to do a little more defining of terms. So I'm throwing a lot of terms at you in this video, but it's important groundwork for what comes later. So we'll start just with the term determinism. And determinism is the view that all events, including human action, are ultimately determined by causes external to the will. Now, as soon as we present that definition, we also have to define will, because that's central to the definition of determinism. Will is the faculty that decides on and initiates action. So right now, you and I are doing quite a few different things. I mean, I'm just sitting here and talking. You're just watching a video. You might be multitasking, okay? But we're doing things. So for instance, I am exerting downward pressure on my chair. I'm breathing. My heart is beating. If you are in a room with other people, you're occupying the visual field of someone else. But these are not actions that you are performing. I'm right now choosing to perform the action of talking, moving my hands, very few and minimal actions, but they are actions and you're doing the same. Action is distinguished by being started by the will. So the will decides I'm going to do this, and then initiates the action, actually moves the limbs or the mouth to get you to do those things. So the idea behind determinism is when you do those things, those actions that you perform are ultimately determined in some way, caused by something outside you. Now, right away we ask the question, well, does this mean we're not free? And this splits determinism into two sub-views. One sub-view says, that's right, it means you have no freedom. Free will is an absolute illusion. This sub-view is known as hard determinism. So all events, including human action, are ultimately determined by causes external to the will in a way that precludes or rules out human freedom entirely. Others say, no, you are determined, but you're also still free. So the causes external to the will determine your action, but not in a way that rule out your freedom. So it's just true, but you're also still free. So you see it's a more lenient or softer view. It's also known as compatibilism because it holds that determinism is compatible with human freedom. The third view here is in a philosophical, not a political sense now, known as libertarianism. And this is the idea that we are not determined, that determinism is false, that we do have free will and we absolutely choose, and we are not determined in any way. We absolutely choose what we do. So these are going to be the three primary views. Now, the way that these views flesh out and the tension between freedom and determinism is going to shape up in very different ways depending on what your primary metaphysical paradigm is. And by that I mean, are you inclined to believe in something supernatural or not? So we're going to look at those two paradigms and how free will versus determinism shapes up for each in the next two videos. Thanks.